Hey there. So I was asked to talk about a topic that has spurred conversations for years before and will continue to do so for many years to come. That topic is about the Hall of Fame and more specifically, who is not currently in the Hall of Fame and who is in the Hall but shouldn't be. The sport that I wanted to spend this video talking about is Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame. The first name on my list of players that are not in the Hall of Fame that should be is Shoeless Joe Jackson. Shoeless Joe was in the majors for 13 years and spent the bulk of his career with Cleveland and Chicago. If you look at the synopsis of his numbers, you might say, sure, his average is fine, but his power numbers aren't there. He didn't knock in a bunch of runs. Well, I'm here to tell you to look at his numbers a little more closely. His average is definitely stout at a 356. His RBIs may seem low with 792, but you have to remember that he played in a different league back then in the early 1900s than what we're accustomed to now. Run scoring was a premium back then. On to his extra base hit numbers. He did not hit a lot of home runs during his career with only 54, but he made up for it by hitting 168 triples during his career. Looking at his stats average over a 162 game season, his stats sit at 356 average, 96 RBIs, 37 doubles, 20 triples, and 25 stolen bases. Those aren't bad numbers at all. He was a World Series champion. He set a single season record for triples in 1912 and a franchise record of 21 triples as a member of the White Sox. Now on to the real reason he isn't in the Hall. Back in 1919, as a member of the White Sox during the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds, he and 7 other players were accused of throwing games during this World Series for the sum of $5,000. It was a year later where Jackson and his teammates were brought in front of a grand jury to figure out if they had in fact thrown those games. Although Jackson claimed he was innocent and never took part in taking the bribe money, he was tossed in the same lot as the rest of his teammates and was banned from baseball. A reason he claims he never took part in throwing the World Series games is based on his numbers. He set a record of 12 base hits during the World Series, which stood until 1964. He threw out every batter that tried to take an extra base on him. He also never committed an error in the outfield during the World Series. He is the clear number one on my list of players who deserve to be in the Hall. The next player that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame is Pete Rose. Pete Rose was a perennial all-star during his 24-year career in baseball. He spent the bulk of those years with the Cincinnati Reds. He's another guy whose power numbers don't scream out at you, but he was great nonetheless. From his numerous 200-plus hit seasons, which helped him see his career hit total sit over 4,000, a fielding percentage of nearly 99%, and his great eye at the plate that would see him walk more than strike out. In today's baseball, that is unheard of. He was an all-around phenomenal player. He was a Rookie of the Year, an MVP, a World Series champion 3 times over, and as I previously stated, an all-star for more than half of his career. So why is he not in the Hall of Fame? Well, in 1989, when Rose was then a manager of the Reds, there were allegations brought against him stating that he was placing wagers on games that involved his Cincinnati Reds team. After dodging hearing appointments set by then-Commissioner Bart Giamatti, they finally settled the negotiations without having to go to court. Rose accepted the permanent place on baseball's ineligibility list and would be able to file for reinstatement in 1 year, which he did then and has continued to do so since, to no avail. On to the reason as why he should be in the Hall. This all happened back in the mid to late 1980s. It was also never confirmed that he placed wagers on games that were against his own team, meaning that while he was a player and then a manager, when he would place a bet, it was on his team to win. In my eyes, given that this happened so long ago and that he never, in theory, bet against his own team and affected the outcome of the game because of said bet, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. On to the final player that I believe belongs in the Hall of Fame. That name is Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling has put together a career that is worthy of the Hall of Fame. If you take a look at some of his numbers, they're pretty comparable to players who are currently in the Hall. Curt had a successful career with 5 different teams. He has had 20 game-winning seasons. He's had campaigns that saw him eclipse 200 innings and 200 strikeouts. He's a World Series champion. Those that can recall in that 2004 run in the postseason for the Boston Red Sox, you got to see Curt Schilling pitch 7 masterful innings against their rival New York Yankees. All that while just 1 day before having surgery to attach a loose ankle tendon to his skin. You could see during the broadcast, blood was pooling and stained his sock. That is where the blood came from. In Game 1 of this series, Curt Schilling was on the hill and dealing with a torn tendon during his less than stellar performance. Knowing that his team and this organization needed him, with the assistance of his team's medical staff, they performed the surgery on his ankle. The medical staff only knew this procedure would work initially by performing the same surgery on a cadaver. This is the works of a man who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, his bloody sock is in the Hall, for heaven's sake. I will say that this year's Hall of Fame voting, Schilling did receive 70% of the votes. You need 75% to be elected into the Hall of Fame, so his trip is coming. Well, those are just a few names that I believe deserve to be called Hall of Famers. Check out my next video as I give you a handful of names that are in the Hall of Fame that don't deserve to be. Until next time, I'm Kevin Householder.